Hey guys, welcome to Modern. I'm Ramon, and this episode I wanted to review the Sony A7 III. So this video is going to be sort of a long-term, year-long review for the Sony A7 III camera. I want to preface this in saying that I've used a bunch of different types of cameras, and I think they're all great, and each has their particular strengths and particular skill set that is more suited for one type of photography or one type of videography over the other. But really, they're all great. So I previously owned the Sony A7 III for a year. The A7 III is the replacement for the Sony's entry-level full-frame camera, the A7 II. The camera has been praised as being the perfect hybrid camera between photography and videography. So after owning the A7 III for over a year, I wanted to make a video to discuss some of my experiences using the camera. When the A7 III was originally released in 2018, it was priced under $2,000. Because of the camera's popularity, the price of the A7 III has really remained steady around that. I think used copies, you could probably pick it up for maybe $1,700, so around that type of range. It's kind of in a smaller body, smaller type of body, so it's kind of really easy to take and carry around with you. The lenses, however, could get really big and be comparable to other full-frame lenses that you might see from Canon or Nikon. So I just wanted to go into some of the things that I really liked with the A7 III. Button customizability is probably one of the big things that I really enjoyed about using the A7 III. Being able to set different features, customizable features to different buttons was something that I really enjoyed. Really enjoyed having a dedicated button that I could go and press, and being able to go into silent shooting mode, as well as another button where I could go into crop frame mode instead of full frame mode, so I could get two different focal lengths when I was out shooting, doing video or doing photography. Another really positive that I liked on the A7 III was a long battery life. The A7 II previously had a very short battery life, and it wouldn't last a day, so you'd have to carry around a bunch of batteries for that camera just to get you throughout the day. Sony's big improvement with the battery life was really great. It lasts a full day and a half of shooting, and I really enjoyed having that extra comfort of not having to worry about carrying around extra batteries. Another great feature in this camera is the frames per second is really fast. Captures action really great because of that. I think it's 10 frames per second, 10 or 12 frames per second was the frames per second was the speed in which you could capture images when you're out there shooting. So I really like that. It could really be a great sports camera or a great event camera if you're looking to capture all different types of fast moving action. Another feature I like is the uncropped 4K image coming out of the A7 III. So there are several A7 III competitors that are also full frame, such as the EOS R and the cameras that are being released from Nikon, the mirrorless cameras being released from Nikon. I think those cameras, they have cropped 4K, so whenever you're shooting, you're going to get a smaller image compared to the A7 III, which is uncropped, which I think is great because you don't have to carry around additional lenses to kind of combat that crop 4K that the camera is producing. I think Sony is probably one of the only cameras that produces uncropped 4K. I think the latest line of Panasonic cameras, I think there might be some uncropping that happens in those cameras, but the A7 III and the A7 line of cameras really do the uncropped 4K well. So I wanted to go into some of the things that I didn't like about the A7 III. After owning the camera for over a year, I discovered a few issues that I did not like with the camera. The most noteworthy issues had to do with the weather sealing in the camera. If you go to an environment where there's a lot of dust in the area or conditions in the area can lead to dust getting into the A7 body and on the sensor, just keep in mind that you will have to use a rocket blower to make sure you clean the sensor between shoots. I think another major pain point that I really had with the A7 III was updating the firmware. As a Mac user, if you're a PC user, you probably won't run into this because when I tested this on a PC, it worked fine. But if you're strictly a Mac user, updating the firmware often failed because you're doing it through a USB cable. For some reason, Sony doesn't offer the ability to do the firmware upgrade via an SD card. You have to use a USB cable. So that was a little bit frustrating especially when you needed to update a firmware to get the camera working the way you wanted it to. Because for instance, there are features like eye autofocus that got improved over the release of the Sony A7 III that you wanted to have it in the camera. So yeah, that was kind of a frustrating thing to have to do to get the new enhanced features into the A7 III body. So I talked about the 4K, the uncropped image of the 4K image in the A7 III. With that, had its drawbacks. Most notably was the fact that recording for a really long time with the A7 III, I found that it overheated a lot. I think, and this happened both indoor and outdoor, overheating occurred. I did find that there is kind of it's not really a secret, but it's kind of a hard to find setting that you could use where you set the tolerance for the 4K heating to a slightly higher tolerance. This would allow you to record a little bit longer in 4K. But yeah, the fact that it's kind of hidden in the menu, and then there's a warning that says that they're not responsible for anything that happens if, I think they're mainly concerned about liability with overheating. Maybe burns might happen, but that's a little something to consider if you're going to be shooting a lot of video, that if you're going to use 4K, it's possibly going to overheat. I know there's been, among several reviews, there's kind of been a mixed feeling about the overheating. It happened for me. I'm not sure about those other reviewers, but 4K, recording in 4K, it did overheat. So next, I wanted to talk about image stabilization, specifically image stabilization for video. The A7 III comes with in-body image stabilization, and I found that the IBIS, the in-body image stabilization, was really more for taking photos and handheld movements and shooting at specific shutter speeds without that shake, that camera shake that does happen. For video, I found it just wasn't, the image stabilization just wasn't very good. A lot of little shakes and jitters. Some people say that it's pretty much due to the full frame sensor. But yeah, I kind of found it lacking, especially since whenever you hear about the A7 line of cameras, you hear about the image stabilization, and that's the in-body image stabilization, and that's kind of like one of the major selling points. So that was a little lacking. Another issue I came across with the Sony A7 III is that the lack of lenses for the Sony E-mount when compared to other manufacturers like Canon and Nikon. However, there have been third-party camera makers such as Sigma and Tamron that have just been stepping up and creating lenses, affordable lenses for the A7 line of cameras. So you could also go that route. You can also go the adapted route and adapt Nikon or Canon lenses to the Sony E-mount. The only issue is that autofocus tends to be less than reliable when using adapters. So in conclusion, if you're primarily a photographer, I think the Sony A7 III is a great investment for you. The combination of having a flip out screen and a long battery life make it perfect for long photo shoots all day. It also has eye autofocus, so great for portraits. If you're planning on shooting more video, I think you would probably be happier with another type of camera, like something like Panasonic or Fuji. So finally, I would like to say thank you for watching today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share the channel. Thank you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one.